What if some of the greatest movies of the 1980s were not loved at all when they first arrived? What if critics walked out, audiences stayed away, and studios quietly buried them? These films were not failures of imagination. They were failures of timing, taste, and courage. Tonight we begin a journey through 15 box office bombs that lost everything on release but gained immortality later. Number 15, Blade Runner, 1982. When Blade Runner arrived in theaters in 1982, it was expected to be the next science fiction event. Instead, it collapsed under the weight of confusion, mismarketing, and audience resistance. Viewers walked in expecting a fast-paced space adventure and walked out stunned by slow rhythms, heavy atmosphere, and moral ambiguity. Critics dismissed it as cold, distant, and emotionally hollow. Warner Brothers panicked, and the film vanished from theaters almost immediately. What audiences did not understand at the time was that Blade Runner was operating on an entirely different wavelength. Ridley Scott crafted a future soaked in rain, neon, and decay where humanity itself felt exhausted. Harrison Ford played a reluctant hero who barely fit the mold of a hero at all. The world felt oppressive, slow, and morally compromised. It was not escapism, it was prophecy. The studio interference did not help. The forced narration flattened mystery, and the imposed ending betrayed the film's bleak core. Only years later, through home video and director cuts, did the real Blade Runner emerge. Viewers finally experienced the story as a meditation on memory, identity, and artificial life. Scholars dissected its themes. Filmmakers copied its visual language endlessly. Cyberpunk as a genre was essentially born from its failure. Blade Runner became sacred text for science fiction fans not because it entertained easily, but because it demanded reflection. What once felt alien became familiar. What once failed financially became priceless culturally. It is now impossible to imagine modern science fiction cinema without its shadow. The number 14, The Thing, 1982. The Thing was released into a hostile environment. Audiences in 1982 were embracing friendly aliens and hopeful futures. John Carpenter's film offered none of that. It was bleak, paranoid, and merciless. Critics recoiled. Viewers stayed away. The box office numbers were disastrous, and the film was labeled ugly and excessive. What terrified people then is exactly what fascinates them now. The Thing stripped horror down to distrust. There were no heroes, only survivors. The creature could be anyone at any moment. Even friendship became a liability. Carpenter shot the film like a siege where fear crept silently and exploded without warning. Rob Bottin's practical effects were condemned at the time as grotesque. Today, they are revered as some of the most groundbreaking work ever put on screen. Every transformation feels painful, physical, and real. Nothing is digital. Nothing feels safe. The film's ending sealed its cult status. No answers, no relief. Just two men waiting in the snow, unsure if either is human. It was an ending audiences were not ready for, but later generations embraced completely. The Thing became a masterclass in slow-burn horror and existential dread. It failed because it refused comfort. It endured because it told the truth. Trust is fragile, survival is lonely, and sometimes the monster looks just like you. Number 13. Big Trouble in Little China, 1986. Big Trouble in Little China died at the box office because no one knew how to sell it. Studios tried to market it as a standard action comedy. Audiences expected a traditional hero story. What they got instead was a subversive genre mashup that openly mocked the idea of the American savior. Kurt Russell's Jack Burton is loud, confident, and completely wrong about everything. He believes he is the hero, but the film quietly makes him the sidekick. That joke sailed over audiences' heads in 1986. Critics called the film messy, juvenile, and unfocused. The studio pulled it quickly. Time revealed the genius. Big Trouble in Little China was a love letter to martial arts, fantasy serials, and pulp adventure filtered through John Carpenter's irreverent humor. It celebrated mythology, chaos, and absurdity. It refused to take itself seriously and dared viewers to do the same. Home video transformed it. Fans quoted it endlessly. Midnight screenings turned it into a ritual. What once felt strange became endlessly rewatchable. Its characters were colorful, its action inventive, its tone fearless. The film did not fail because it was bad. It failed because it was smarter than its marketing. Today, it stands as one of the boldest genre experiments of the decade. Eighth Dimension, 1984. When the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. Across the Eighth Dimension arrived in 1984, it confused nearly everyone. The film refused to explain itself. It dropped audiences into a world where rock stars were scientists, comic book logic ruled reality, and interdimensional aliens spoke with exaggerated accents. Studios had no idea how to sell it. Audiences had no idea what they were watching. The box office collapse was swift and decisive. What doomed it initially was also what saved it later. Buckaroo Banzai demanded active participation. It assumed the viewer would keep up or fall behind. There was no hand-holding. Characters referenced unseen adventures. Plot threads were introduced and abandoned casually. The film behaved like a cult object from the future that had accidentally slipped into the present. Peter Weller played Buckaroo as a man so competent he barely needed to explain himself. That confidence unsettled audiences used to clear heroes and villains. The film laughed at genre boundaries. Science fiction, comedy, superhero satire, and rock opera existed side by side without apology. Home video changed everything. Fans rewound scenes, paused dialogue, and built mythologies around every line. The very confusion that repelled mass audiences became fuel for obsession. Midnight screenings turned into celebrations. Quotes became passwords. The film became a shared language for outsiders. Buckaroo Banzai did not fail because it lacked imagination. It failed because imagination was the point. It became a cult masterpiece because it trusted its audience to catch up eventually. Number 11. Brazil, 1985. Brazil was dead on arrival because it fought its own studio. Terry Gilliam delivered a dystopian nightmare filled with bureaucracy, absurdity, and despair. Universal wanted something lighter, something hopeful, something marketable. Gilliam refused. The result was a delayed release, butchered edits, and a confused audience reception that buried the film financially. The world of Brazil is suffocating. Paperwork replaces humanity. Technology traps instead of liberates. Dreams become the only escape. Jonathan Pryce plays a man drowning in systems that do not care whether he lives or dies. It was not comfortable entertainment. It was confrontation. Critics were divided. Some praised its ambition. Others called it indulgent. Audiences stayed away. The film felt too strange, too dark, too angry for its time. But Gilliam never stopped fighting. He pushed for his cut. He exposed studio interference publicly. Slowly, the true version emerged. When viewers finally saw Brazil as intended, it clicked. The film spoke to every generation that felt crushed by systems larger than themselves. Its imagery haunted, its humor cut deep, its ending refused compromise. Brazil became a cult masterpiece because it told the truth without softening the blow. It did not want approval. It wanted honesty. Time rewarded that courage. Number 10. Labyrinth, 1986. Labyrinth failed because it was impossible to categorize. Was it a children's fantasy, a dark fairy tale, a musical, a surreal dream? Studios marketed it as a family film. Parents brought young children. The tone confused them. The box office numbers disappointed, and the film quietly faded away. Jim Henson's vision was stranger than audiences expected. Puppets were grotesque and charming. The world shifted constantly, logic bent. David Bowie's Goblin King was seductive, theatrical, and unsettling. Jennifer Connelly played a flawed heroine who learned responsibility through loss rather than reward. Critics dismissed it as uneven. Audiences shrugged. But children who watched it on home video saw something else entirely. They saw a dream space where fear, desire, and imagination collided. The songs lingered. The imagery stayed burned into memory. As those children grew older, Labyrinth grew with them. Themes of control, temptation, and growing up revealed themselves slowly. Bowie's performance became iconic. The puppetry became legendary. The film became a rite of passage. Labyrinth did not fail because it lacked magic. It failed because its magic was personal. It needed time. Time turned it into a cult masterpiece. Number 9. Streets of Fire, 1984. Streets of Fire collapsed at the box office because it existed in a world that did not exist anywhere else. Walter Hill called it a rock and roll fable, but audiences did not know what that meant. The film was not set in the past or the future. It lived in a mythic, neon-soaked city where leather jackets ruled night streets and music functioned like destiny. Viewers were confused. Critics were baffled. Ticket sales vanished. What Streets of Fire offered was pure, stylized emotion. The story was simple. A girl is taken. A man comes back to save her. But the presentation turned simplicity into operatic force. Firelight, rain, and music shaped every scene. Characters felt larger than life and deliberately artificial. Michael Paré played a stoic drifter who spoke little and felt like a comic book hero come alive. Diane Lane embodied longing and ambition. Willem Dafoe delivered one of the most unhinged villains of the decade. The film did not chase realism, it chased feeling. Audiences in 1984 were not ready for that approach. They wanted clear genres and safe expectations. Streets of Fire rejected both. It performed poorly and was quickly dismissed. Home video resurrected it. Music lovers embraced it. Style-obsessed filmmakers studied it. The film became a visual influence rather than a narrative one. Music videos borrowed from it endlessly. Fashion absorbed it. Its atmosphere outlived its plot. Streets of Fire became a cult masterpiece because it understood that mood can matter more than logic. It failed because it arrived too early. It succeeded because style never truly ages. Number 8. Videodrome, 1983. Videodrome was too disturbing to survive mainstream release. David Cronenberg delivered a body horror manifesto disguised as science fiction. Audiences recoiled. Critics argued. The box office suffered badly. The film was labeled obscene, confusing, and dangerous. James Woods played a television executive who discovers a broadcast signal that causes hallucinations, physical mutations, and psychological collapse. Screens pulse. Flesh opens. Reality erodes. Videodrome did not explain itself because explanation was not the point. It was about how media reshapes the body and mind. In 1983, this felt like insanity. Home video was new. Cable television was expanding. The internet was unimaginable. Audiences were not ready to confront how deeply media would invade human identity. Time changed everything. Videodrome became prophetic. Scholars revisited it. Fans dissected it. Lines once mocked became chilling truths. The imagery felt less outrageous and more accurate. The practical effects remain shocking. The ideas remain unsettling. Videodrome does not age because its warning grows louder every year. It failed financially because it frightened people away. It became a cult masterpiece because fear turned out to be justified. Number 7. Near Dark, 1987. Near Dark died quietly in theaters because it released at the worst possible moment. Vampire films were everywhere and audiences were tired. Marketing failed to explain what made this one different. The box office numbers barely registered. Kathryn Bigelow reinvented the vampire myth as a dusty, nocturnal road movie. Her creatures were not elegant aristocrats. They were predators drifting through forgotten towns, feeding and moving on. Violence felt sudden and brutal. Immortality felt exhausting. The cast delivered raw performances. Bill Paxton created a monster both charismatic and horrifying. Lance Henriksen embodied ancient weariness. The film stripped romance from vampirism and replaced it with hunger. Critics missed it. Audiences ignored it. The film vanished. Home video saved it. Horror fans recognized its originality. Filmmakers praised its tone. Near Dark became a blueprint for modern grounded vampire stories. It failed because it refused glamour. It endured because it felt real. Number 6. Legend, 1985. Legend arrived in 1985 carrying impossible expectations. Studios wanted a fantasy spectacle that could replicate earlier successes. What Ridley Scott delivered was something slower, darker, and more dreamlike. Audiences expected adventure. What they received felt like a myth whispered rather than shouted. The box office response was weak, and the film was quickly dismissed as a misfire. Tom Cruise played a youthful hero at the beginning of his stardom, yet the film was not built around him. The true force of Legend was atmosphere. Forests breathed. Darkness crept like a living presence. Light felt fragile. Tim Curry's Lord of Darkness became one of the most visually striking villains ever created. His presence dominated the film in ways audiences did not expect. Studio interference fractured the release. Music was altered. Scenes were cut. Tone shifted depending on region. The theatrical version felt incomplete and confused. Viewers sensed something missing, even if they could not name it. Years later, restored cuts revealed the truth. Legend was not meant to rush. It was meant to linger. It was a fairy tale about innocence threatened by corruption, about balance rather than victory, about beauty fighting entropy. Home video transformed perception. Fantasy fans embraced it. Designers studied it. Practical effects, lovers praised it. Curry's performance became iconic. The film became a visual touchstone for dark fantasy cinema. Legend failed because it refused to behave like a blockbuster. It became a cult masterpiece because it trusted imagery and mood over noise. Number 5. The King of Comedy, 1982. The King of Comedy collapsed at the box office because it made people uncomfortable. Audiences expected another crime saga from Martin Scorsese. Instead, they received a quiet, unsettling portrait of obsession, delusion, and entitlement. Laughter caught in throats. Tickets went unsold. Robert De Niro played Rupert Pupkin with terrifying restraint. He was polite, awkward, and convinced of his destined greatness. He did not rage. He smiled. That smile disturbed viewers far more than violence ever could. The film forced audiences to sit inside the mind of someone who believed fame was owed to him. In 1982, this felt wrong. Celebrity culture was still glossy. Late-night television was warm and controlled. The film stripped that illusion away. Jerry Lewis played himself as distant, exhausted, and guarded. The fantasy of access was exposed as a lie. Critics were divided. Audiences rejected it. The film disappeared. Time reversed everything. As fame became more transactional and obsession more visible, the King of Comedy began to feel prophetic. Viewers recognized Rupert everywhere. Reality television influencers, stalkers, and entitlement culture all traced back to this portrait. Scorsese had predicted a future nobody wanted to admit was coming. The film became studied, revered, and quoted. Its influence spread quietly. The King of Comedy failed because it held up an honest mirror. It became a cult masterpiece because that reflection became impossible to ignore. The number 4, Heathers, 1988. Heathers bombed because it attacked its audience. Teen films in the late 80s were light, romantic, and reassuring. Heathers arrived sharp, cynical, and brutal. Studios did not know how to market a film where popularity was lethal and romance ended in murder. Audiences stayed away. Winona Ryder played a girl suffocating inside social hierarchy. Christian Slater played rebellion with a smile and a gun. The film turned high school into a battlefield where language cut deeper than knives. Humor was pitch black. Consequences were real. Critics admired its wit, but theaters remained empty. The film felt too cruel, too strange, too honest. It vanished quickly. Home video resurrected it. Teenagers discovered it privately. Lines became mantras. Fashion followed. The film spoke to alienation rather than comfort. It validated anger rather than smoothing it over. As conversations about bullying identity and violence evolved, Heathers felt increasingly relevant. What once felt shocking became insightful. The satire sharpened with age. Heathers became a cult masterpiece because it refused nostalgia. It did not romanticize youth, it exposed it. That honesty cost it success. It earned it immortality. Number 3. Once Upon a Time in America, 1984. Once Upon a Time in America collapsed at the box office because it was mutilated before audiences ever saw it. Sergio Leone delivered an epic meditation on memory, regret, and time itself. Studios panicked at its length and structure. They re-edited it into chronological order, removed crucial scenes, and stripped away its emotional spine. What reached theaters barely resembled the film Leone intended. Audiences were confused and disengaged. Critics were harsh. The story felt cold, fragmented, and pointless. The film disappeared quickly and was labeled a failure despite its enormous ambition and meticulous craft. What had been destroyed was subtlety. Leone built the film like memory itself, drifting backward and forward through guilt and nostalgia. Robert De Niro played a man haunted by choices he could never undo. Violence was not glorified, it was corrosive. Friendship decayed, love rotted, success tasted hollow. Years later, restored cuts revealed the truth. The film was not about gangsters rising, it was about men decaying. Time did not heal wounds, it preserved them. Every choice echoed forever. Critics reversed course. Filmmakers praised it openly, scholars dissected it. The score became legendary. The film emerged as one of the most devastating portraits of regret ever made. It failed because it demanded patience and trust. It became a cult masterpiece because time finally allowed it to breathe. Number 2. Repo Man, 1984. Repo Man failed theatrically because it felt anarchic and unpolished. Studios did not know how to sell a punk-fueled science fiction satire about car repossession and nuclear paranoia. Audiences expecting clarity received chaos. The box office response was muted. Emilio Estevez played a directionless youth drifting into a job defined by moral emptiness. The world of Repo Man was stripped of meaning. Convenience stores sold generic food. Authority figures lied casually. The future felt disposable. Humor was deadpan and relentless. What confused viewers was the tone. Comedy, horror, science fiction, and social satire collided without warning. The film refused emotional comfort. Characters did not grow, they survived. Home video transformed it. Punk audiences claimed it. Lines became scripture. The soundtrack defined a generation. The film's worldview matched a growing sense of cultural disillusionment. Repo Man became less a movie and more a philosophy. Life was arbitrary. Systems were broken. Belief was optional. Style became resistance. It failed because it rejected narrative satisfaction. It became a cult masterpiece because it articulated a truth others avoided. Number 1. The Princess Bride, 1987. The Princess Bride failed at the box office because sincerity had fallen out of fashion. Studios struggled to explain what kind of film it was supposed to be. It was not a broad comedy. It was not a straight fantasy. It was not a cynical parody. Marketing campaigns tried to sell spectacle when the film's true power was intimacy. Audiences stayed home. What arrived instead was a quiet miracle. The Princess Bride treated storytelling as something sacred. It believed adventure could still be noble. It believed romance could still be honest. It believed humor could exist without cruelty. That confidence felt outdated in 1987. Every character was written with care. Wesley was brave without arrogance. Buttercup was strong without hardness. Inigo Montoya carried grief like a wound that never closed. Even villains were human enough to feel remembered rather than defeated. The framing device mattered. A story passed from one generation to another, imagination surviving cynicism. The film understood that fairy tales are not lies. They are tools for survival. They teach courage, loyalty, and hope when reality feels heavier. Home video unlocked its destiny. Families watched it together. Children memorized it. Adults rediscovered it. Quotes became shared language. Scenes became rituals. The film aged without bitterness because it never mocked belief. The Princess Bride failed because it trusted the audience to feel rather than consume. It became a cult masterpiece because feeling never goes out of style. These films were not rejected because they were bad. They were rejected because they arrived too early, too strange, or too honest. Time corrected the verdict. Audiences returned. Meaning emerged. And what once failed quietly became unforgettable forever.